makes the Sweet 16 after beating VCU by 9 and then Wisconsin by 2. Wisconsin has a shot at the end of the game to tie it and send it to overtime. John Tonje ends up missing it, and BYU advances. So Alabama will take on BYU on Thursday at 6:09 p.m. Central Time. This game is going to be in the Prudential Center in New Jersey, and it will be an absolute electric matchup. Alabama and BYU, and one of the reporters asked Nate about this in the post game for St. Mary's. Alabama and BYU play a very similar style. Kevin Young has done a very good job with BYU of converting them to a much more pro-style, NBA-style system. Obviously, with their previous coach, Mark Pope, he was doing that as well, but this is a very Kentucky-esque team, right? When you look at where Mark Pope came from at BYU and the style that BYU runs and the style that Kentucky runs currently, very, very similar. Additionally, when you're looking at BYU and you look at the offense and defensive splits from a KenPom perspective, much better offensive team than defensive team, does not do a particularly great job at running teams off the three-point line, a very efficient offensive team, but again, a bit of a lackluster defensive team outside of defensive rebounding. That is something that, again, is very indicative of what we see with Kentucky, and that gives me a lot of hope as an Alabama fan because Kentucky is a team that Alabama has played incredibly well against 3 times this season, right? Obviously, there are different players on these rosters. They're not going to be the same exactly, but it is a very similar team in the sense that there are shooters all over the floor. They have a couple of big guys that can absolutely rebound the basketball, and it is going to be a team which, similar to Kentucky, if you do not guard, if you lose your matchup, they can make you pay from the three-point line. Right, BYU does a very good job shooting from deep. They're a team that scored 100 points at one point earlier this season. They're in the 90s quite a lot this season, and they have been a very good offensive team. Like I said, they are currently 9th in KenPom's offensive efficiency. They are 71st in defensive efficiency. For reference, if you look at Kentucky, which I know we just referenced, Kentucky is 11th and 45th. So a slightly worse offense, by just 2 points, or I guess by about half a point in 2 positions. And then Kentucky is actually a substantially better defense at 45th versus 70th. So that's what you're looking at when you're looking at these teams from an offense and defensive standpoint. Like I said, I look at this to be a very, very similar matchup to what you see. Again, the players are not going to be the same. I'm not expecting them to be, but that is what you're looking at when you look at these teams. A couple of notes and a couple of players that you really need to watch when you're looking at BYU, and some players that Alabama is absolutely going to have to circle. First things first, their point guard. Igor Dimon, 6'9", 6'8", 6'9", very big point guard. 34th in the country in assist rate, does a really, really good job facilitating the offense, is a bit of a flashy passer, can make a lot of the passes on the basketball court, is only a 28% three-point shooter, but has the confidence. He stepped into a couple in the Wisconsin game and just absolutely nothing but net. He can be a confident three-point shooter, so he isn't somebody that you want to get hot, but he is somebody that is definitely a little bit more of a pass-first point guard that's trying to facilitate the offense and get his other guys that are much better shooters an open shot. They have 2 guys that are actually shooting over 43% from 3, in Richie Saunders and Trevin Nell. Both guys, like I said, both guys over 43% from 3, top 60 in the country in three-point percentage. They are guys that you absolutely cannot leave open. But even if you look at them, you have a guy like Dawson Baker that shoots 38% from 3. Dalen Hall shoots 36%. Catchings shoots 35%. They have plenty of guys that can shoot and lace it from deep. So it is a team that you really have to pick your poison on if you're going to leave somebody open. And there are some guys that you absolutely cannot leave open, with 3 of them just shooting absolutely incredibly from deep. Then when you look on the inside, they have 2 main guys. They're smaller centers. They're fairly large body size, but they're fairly short. In Traore and Kibakita, both guys are very good rebounders. Traore, top top 70 in offensive and top 100 in defensive rebounding. Keita top 10 in both, right? Keita is an incredibly, incredibly good rebounder on both sides of the floor. So both of those guys are guys that if you can get them in foul trouble early and get them off the floor so that you're not having to compete with them from a rebounding standpoint, that would be incredible, because they are really the best two rebounders on the team, and without them, they are not a great rebounding team. So if you can get them in foul trouble, that would be awesome. But even if you can't, you really just have to fight for every rebound. You can't let the smaller guy kind of get under you, get the rebound. This is a game which I expect Mohamed Diabate to play a huge role in this game. Obviously, you need good Cliff in this game. The good thing about this is because they are a little bit smaller, they are not great in block rate. They're okay in blocks, but when you look at an Alabama team that goes to the rim a lot, sometimes if you have a team that's a very good shot blocking team, it can help neutralize Alabama if the guards are not making the correct decisions. Nate talks about if you're getting your shot blocked, you're not making the right decision, but unfortunately, sometimes that is the case. This is a team where, because they're not as good of a shot blocking team, they don't have that height and that presence on the interior that can kind of erase a lot of mistakes. I would expect that if Alabama can get by some of their guys, they are going to be able to have some success in the interior. I would also think because of the way that BYU gambles at times, they do leave some guys open from three-point line. That was something I talked about up front, but they are 340th in the country, which is bottom 25 in the country at three-point field goal rate. So they give up a ton of three-point field goal attempts compared to just field goal attempts in general. About 45% of a team's shots against them end up being three-point attempts. And against a team like Alabama, if you don't run us off the three-point line, it can spell disaster. Obviously, Alabama has to shoot well, but with the number of shooters that Alabama has, not running us off the three-point line typically is not a recipe for success. So that is something that you're going to want to kind of watch. To their credit, BYU also does take quite a lot of threes, obviously, with the elite shooters that they have. So it's going to be something that Alabama's going to have to be successful in as well. I'm sure Alabama's going to try to run teams off the three-point line, funnel them down to Cliff, as we do in most cases. But I would be curious to see what happens. There's some matchups that I am very curious about. You look at a guy like LeBaron Philon matching up against Igor Dimon. I think that's going to be a really good matchup. I would expect that we give a guy like Philon to Dimon just due to the fact that Dimon has so much extra height on a guy like Mark Sears or Aiden Holloway. Also, just how shifty Dimon can be. I would expect Mark Sears on a guy probably like Trevin Nell. I think that's who you're going to have him on, or maybe Richie Saunders, one of the three-point shooters, and just have to tell Mark, hey, you have to stay attached. You have to fight through every screen, because these guys, you cannot leave them open. And, if you leave them open, if you go under a screen instead of over, it's going to be a problem, right? So that's some of the key facts when you look at this game. This will be a hugely offensive game. I would expect the winner of this game to get into the 90-point range. It would not shock me if both teams got into 90 points in this game. I wouldn't expect it, but it wouldn't truly shock me. I do think that Alabama matches up pretty well with BYU. I talked about, that Kentucky matchup and being very similar because of the similarity in play style, the similarity in offensive skill talent, right? The guys that can just absolutely shoot incredibly well from deep, and the way that you just can't leave guys. I think that Alabama has played a couple of teams this season, obviously Kentucky being one of them, and some other teams in the SEC that can shoot so well from deep, that I do think that Alabama is prepared for this matchup. I think that Alabama matches up, like I said, pretty well with BYU from that standpoint. I would be curious to see, for me to feel super comfortable in this game, I want to see good rebounding Cliff. I want to see good rebounding Mohamed Diabate, because obviously, even if Alabama matches up fairly well and forces the shots we want them to take, if we're losing the rebound battle in this game, it can be a long day, right? Even if Alabama is able to force the type of shots on offense and able to have them be a little bit more inefficient than what they're used to, it can be an issue when if you're giving up insane rebounds. And again, with them having two very elite rebounders, that is something that concerns me slightly. But like I said, I do think that Alabama will have success in this game. I am going to predict Alabama to win this one. I do think that Alabama, having the guys that have made a run before, I think Alabama having proven, hey, this is what we're able to do. Honestly, I think that BYU being the hot thing right now, BYU is one of the hottest teams coming into the tournament. They're technically, per Bart Torvik, that does like a most recent rankings, they are technically a hotter team and a better ranked team than Alabama over the last couple. It's very, very close, but they are technically a better ranked team than Alabama. So I do think that when you look at what Alabama's seeing a lot of people say, well, Duke has this region completely locked up, or BYU potentially could knock off Alabama. I think that that's a situation where the team is going to take that to heart. I know Nate's been showing the players a lot of, hey, these guys don't believe in you type situations. I think that is something the team is going to take to heart. I think that's something that Alabama is going to play with. I expect another big game out of Cliff Amore. When you have these smaller centers, obviously they can fight for rebounds and such, but I do think that the way that Alabama potentially is going to be able to play in pick and roll and able to get a free roller available with a guy like Cliff Amore, I do think that they're going to be able to have some success. I would expect this game to be much more in the higher possession range. Would not shock me if this game probably hits 75 to 78 possessions if I was guessing, because Alabama and BYU are both going to be very content running with the basketball when they get a rebound or a made shot. So obviously Alabama's transition defense is going to have to be as good as it has been at times this season. You can't have a game like North Carolina when you're giving up a lot of stuff in transition. But I do think that Alabama has the guys and has the skill talent to be successful in this game. I think that Alabama wins it. I think that Alabama wins it by a score of, I'm going to go 93 to 86. I think that is going to be a pretty close game. I think that Alabama maybe pulls away near the end with some free throws as BYU tries to lengthen the game. But I do think that Alabama can win this game and move on to just their third Elite Eight in school history. Like I said, if Alabama does win this game, I will be recording an episode on Friday, which will come out so that you can watch in advance of my preview for the Saturday game. As always, if you're curious about my player-by-player breakdowns, those happen before the morning of every game. Those come out on Twitter. So follow me over on Twitter. Those threads are going to come out. I will break down the game in its entirety. I will give player-by-player breakdowns. I will give my player to watch for Alabama. And I will give, hey, what I think this game is going to look like from an overall perspective. Obviously, I've given my prediction here. It probably will be the same prediction in that thread if I don't change my mind. But it will be a little bit more player by player and what I think about this game as a whole, right? So if you are interested in those, follow me over on Twitter. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I really do appreciate the support on the podcast, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.